Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Monday, February 24th, 2020, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, we're going to move on in my series on the quote unquote giants or large hominids, as I like to call them, state by state, and in this video we're going to cover West Virginia. And there's some fascinating accounts in there, and it's often the details in the accounts is what makes them so fascinating. And just leave it to your imagination to make sense of these things, because often no sense is made out of any of these things. Just hear about the account. Perhaps sometimes some officials come from either the Smithsonian or other universities around the country, wherever these states are. And they recover the objects, etc. And then nothing is to be heard of them again. And then we have this supposed, crummy historical background on these people, where'd they come from, where they went to, nobody knows. And it's just this whole transitional phase that doesn't seem to have any sort of coverage by mainstream media, and just left to think that this sort of seamless transition, once there were the mound builders, then there were the Native Americans. And when you hear the stories about it, and nothing is really said about it in these things, and often we hear of these inscriptions and hieroglyphics as they're described many times or whatever. And did anybody ever bother to try to decipher them or try to see what they mean? And just you get some attributions to the Mesoamerican cultures, some sort of relationship, and it always has to, it's like all the archaeology in the world is, comes down to the Americas being the newest part of whatever it is, and then North America is just forget about it. A lot of coverage on South America and Central America, but mostly the North American continent is all the native peoples there and their histories or whatever. But anything about the people that came before them in a lot of these cases, supposedly by their own mythologies and tales and histories, nothing. So it's just a different world existed back then. And I was just watching Robert Seffer's video on his channel, and a few videos that he's done. This one's about Cro-Magnon, pure Cro-Magnon hominids apparently were found, this ancient tomb with all these pure Cro-Magnon people, until some point later on where other people came and then wrecked their DNA or whatever. And about the bearded gods of ancient Peru and where they came from and where they went to. Another very interesting story. Again, it seems like to be the engineers making their travels around the world, apparently after some sort of catastrophe or cataclysm where the sun was gone for a few days. I don't know. But you can see in this video here, the picture on here is this landmass in the middle of the Atlantic here, and you see this sort of island there, like here's Mu and here Atlantis apparently, right? And there's the northeastern part of North America right over there. So I could almost bet that Atlantis being an island nation, right, similar to that of, let's say, the UK or Japan, for example, okay, or any sort of island nation anywhere. What happens is your population expands, and then you need resources that you don't have necessarily access to. And what you're gonna do, you gotta go get them somewhere, okay? And it just so happens that maybe at the time of Atlantis there is when we're talking about um, John Jensen here, ancient canal builders with these artificial harbors that are 7,000, 8,000, and God only knows how many thousands of years old elsewhere. And around Long Island, these artificial harbors, and who would have the money and time and machinery to invest in these things and would need resources on, regular basis. I don't know, something to think about, but, sure seems that way to me. And of course, again, when you got these relationships going on in a world where there are large hominids and little mini people all over the planet in all sorts of arrangements, elongated skulls, vaulted craniums, skulls with horns and horn buds, people with tails, like the Basque people are often, as Robert Sheffer reports, born with tails very often. They've got a lot of Denisovan DNA in them, apparently, I guess. But, judging by all those things that I just said, the picture of the past is nothing like what they say it is at all. It's totally different. And the Americas is deeply involved in that history, and that's why it has the least archaeological coverage in these areas. And, they said what they said, about it. And there is some recent stuff, like the stuff in Indiana, which is important stuff there, which shows this two-tiered society going on between the Hopewell and the Adena, living in a two-tiered society where it seems to resemble that of the Watusi tribes and the tribes that the lady there, author that I interviewed there, Mongol there, from Laotian, right? Laos, the Laotian lady, right? And the kings from the Fiji Islands there, who were just these 7 foot 7-inch tall monsters, that were huge, and they were big, huge guys, and they were good looking too. But, I guess they were good looking giants in the past too. Not all of them were weird and ugly. I don't know. They said, they're hybrids maybe. I don't know. I think there's a lot more to it than we know. Average skeleton, 7 feet, Preston County, West Virginia. At the Sandy Creek Mound in Preston, West Virginia, several skulls were excavated from this mound. After trying to retrieve one of the skulls and failing as it crumbled away at the touch, one was secured. All of the skulls had a peculiar 1 inch by 1/2 inch bone where the sutures meet. All of them possessed this peculiar feature. The skulls were long and narrow, long faces and low foreheads. A skeleton was found at Tioga Point on the Murray Farm outside the city limits, southwest of the town of Save. In a mound there the bones of 68 were buried there. It was estimated to have happened about 1200 AD. The average size of these 68 skeletons was about 7 feet in length, with many of these individuals much taller. Many of the skulls possessed horn buds. Horns had been there from birth, which were located 2 inches above the forehead. The excavators of these skeletons were Professor A.B. Skinner from the American Investigating Museum, Professor W.K. Moorhead from the Phillips Andover Academy, Dr. G.P. Donahue Church, dignitary and Pennsylvania state historian. It seems that the skeletons were sent to the American Investigating Museum, and the museum does not admit to having them or their existence. A Weird America, A Guide to Places of Mystery in the United States, Jim Brandon. History of Preston County, West Virginia, 1888. Fritz Zimmerman, The Nephilim Chronicles. So, horn buds. Okay, so, you got these large hominids of the past walking around with horns and horn buds, and oh my God, what else could you possibly imagine? But, there's nothing to say about it. All these people were dispatched to look at these things, and, nothing, I guess, right? Nothing to say about it, right? 7-foot skeleton, Charleston, West Virginia. A giant's remains in a mound from the Charleston, West Virginia call. Professor Norris, the ethnologist who has been examining the mounds in this section of West Virginia for several months, the other day opened the big mound on Colonel B. H. Smith's farm, 6 or 8 miles below here. This is the largest mound in the valley and proved a rich storehouse. The mound is 50 feet high, and they dug down to the bottom. It was evidently the burial place of a noted chief who had been interred with unusual honors. At the bottom, they found the bones of a human being measuring 7 feet in length and 19 inches across the shoulders. He was lying flat, and at either side, lying at an angle of about 45 degrees, with their feet pointed toward their chief, were other men. On one side 2, and on the other 3. At the head of the chief lay another man, with his hands extended before him and bearing 2 bracelets of copper. On each side of the chief's wrists were 6 copper bracelets, while a looking glass of mica lay at his shoulder, and a gorget of copper rested on his breast. 4 copper bracelets were under his head, with an arrow in the center. A house 12 feet in diameter and 10 feet high, with a ridgepole 1 foot in diameter, had been erected over them, and the whole covered by dirt that formed the mound. Each of the men buried there had been enclosed in a bark coffin. So that's pretty interesting there, with all that going on there. And Professor Norris, the ethnologist, was dispatched here to find this 7-foot guy and all this stuff. And this is New York Times, 1883. Well, what happened to it? Where is all this stuff? Can we look at it? Where is it? It's just privileged people get to see it? I mean, is that what it's all about? I mean, I got some choice words for you if it's like that. 10 feet 9 inch human skeleton. New York Times, November 21st, 1856. Skeleton 10 foot 9 inches in length. Skeleton of a giant found. And imagine, if you're 10 foot 9 inches in length, okay, I bet you're going to be throwing around some mighty big stones and rocks and boulders like no problem, I was watching a thing about black bears, because I go into the wild sometimes, every few years it seems, and I was checking out some stuff on, facts about black bears, and they showed this black bear, and black bears can weigh like, somewhere between like 250 pounds and 500 and 600 pounds. Some of the really big ones, the big, male alphas, go like 800 pounds. That's a big boy right there. And he's like tossing around this giant boulder that, no human being could possibly be throwing this thing around. I mean, if you're weighing like that much, throwing something like that around, and, he's trying to get at some worms or whatever he was doing. And he was throwing this giant boulder around, and, they don't have the veil. They don't think about it, they just want to get food. And like us, we think about it, I'll get a hernia trying to do that. But The bear don't think that. He just exerts all his power all at once because he's not thinking about it. We got the veil, they don't. Skeleton of a giant found. A day or two since, some workmen engaged in subsoiling the grounds of Sheriff Wickham at his vineyard in East Wheeling came across a human skeleton. Although much decayed, there was little difficulty in identifying it by placing the bones, which could not have belonged to others than a human body, in their original position. The impression made by the skeleton in the earth and the skeleton itself were measured by the sheriff and a brother in the craft locale, both of whom were prepared to swear that it was 10 feet 9 inches in length. Its jaws and teeth were almost as large as those of a horse. The bones were to be seen at the sheriff's office, Wheeling Times. This is 1856. It's pretty early, but even so, if you're thinking people don't know what human skeletons look like back then, you're crazy. Of course they did. That's what people go, I didn't know what they were looking at. I highly doubt, out of these thousands and thousands, every single one of them is incorrect. I mean, that's what they would like you to believe, all the naysayers. But it's impossible, statistically impossible. Skeleton 7 foot 8 inches and a large axe. Giant's axe. Dear Mr. Lately, some years ago when the Colonel Ben Smith Mound was opened by Professor Norris of the Smithsonian, he found the skeleton of a giant which measured 7 feet 8 inches in length. This occurred about 15 years ago. Now comes a sequel. A few days ago, Joe Forster was plowing near the mound and unearthed a stone axe. This axe is of granite, beautifully made and well preserved. It weighs 7 pounds 8 ounces, the largest ever found about here. Dr. J. N. Mayhem bought the axe and has it in his possession. Could this have been the giant's axe? Can't you get some of your correspondents to give an article on Indian axes, their history, sizes, etc.? Very truly yours, Robert Douglas Roller. And so they dug up this 7-pound axe. I don't know, but look, if you can find one that's 7 pounds, they make some big malls and stuff out there for splitting logs and whatnot. You try swinging that thing around, and try swinging it vertically instead of horizontally like a sledgehammer. Starts to wear on you in a little while, so that's a heavy axe made of granite. Skeleton 6'7" and to 7'6", and again, I was talking to Harry Hubbard, and he's like, "What do you consider to be a giant?" I'm like, 7 foot, man. It's look, we don't have a lot of 7-footers in the world. It's a fraction of 1%. 7-foot people in the world. I don't know if people realize it, but a fraction of 1% of people in the world are over 7 foot tall. It's just so rare. And so, even if they find ones that are 6, 7, and you got to understand, Harry Hubbard's like, well, I consider giants 14 foot. I mean, that would definitely be a giant for sure, man. But just between us and on the channel, we're calling them giants, quote unquote, but we know what we're talking about. We're talking about large hominids that came in all sorts of varieties, because it's kind of hard to call them just generally giants, because it seems to be a bit deeper than that. But, there's a sort of general category, in polite conversation, nobody should ever say giant, because immediately people's ears are going to turn off. But if you say large hominids of every sort of variety, And maybe somebody's going to say, "What? Oh, what's that about?" You know, I don't know. I'm just saying. Our bones of giants. Looks like the title was really cut off there. Our bones of giants. Mound builders had peculiar heads. Again, with the peculiar heads, and we also hear this again and again, even with Galena Canyon, the Love Rock Cave people, Snake Town, Arizona. Again and again, as we've gone through all the states, these humanoid type people with different skull types, some with these horn buds, elongated skulls, low brows with dolichocephalic heads and brachiocephalic, as they call it, but really vaulted craniums like the Adena. So you just go on and on with this down to like the Baracus, the truly elongated skull people who are also of rather tall stature, according to the history of height, which is something that I've researched deeply. And I was telling Harry Hubbard that I've done all research on the history of height. And, we're still not that tall. Average height worldwide is still like 5'8" or 5'9". It's not tall at all. So, where it seems like it, maybe it seems to everybody that there's like a lot of tall people, but there really aren't. Most people are of average size. And that's the way it is. But, when you get people who are like 7 foot and taller, now we're talking about, but we're not just talking about tall. See, that's because that's the first thing that comes to mind, but also the size, which they often report in these things, the size of the bones being a lot thicker. See, so it's not only the height, or else, it'd just be like string beans or, suffering from, all sorts of other peculiar things. But, apparently some people, like those Fiji chiefs, are just huge. Like Shaq, man, Shaq. My buddy was saying, I was talking about Shaq, and I was like, that guy is just gigantic, man. And he's like, yo, he's a giant. He's like a real giant. And, I got it. Mound builders have peculiar heads. Wheeling, West Virginia. Special. Professor E.L. Wiley, another professor. So far, we've read how many of these, and all seem to be official accounts, And then all the bones and the stuff, like, disappears into a black hole. Where'd it go? Nobody knows. Out the back door. Oh boy. And J.L. Williamson of Friendly have made examination of the giant skeletons found by children playing near that town. The femur and vertebrae were found to be in a remarkable state of preservation and showed the persons to be of enormous stature. The skeletons range in height from 7 feet 6 inches down to 6 feet 7 inches. The skulls found are of peculiar formation. The forehead is low and slopes back gradually, while the back part of the head is very prominent, much more so than the skulls of people living at the present day. The legs are exceedingly long and the bones unusually large. The finding of the skeletons has created a great deal of interest, and the general impression is that the bones are the remains of the people who built the mounds, the largest in the country being located at Moundsville, Marshall County. So Moundsville, big site there. And giant people found, giant humanoids. This is an Afro-American 1908, so 20th century. So, and here it's saying the tallest 2 basketball players are 7 feet 7 inches. Skeletons can lose up to 3 inches in height over time. A tribe of 7-footers is a rare thing indeed. If you were to start digging up graves, it would take you approximately 2,300,000 graves before you find a 7-footer. Beach bottom, giant human skeleton. There were giants. From the Philadelphia Public Ledger, discovery of a giant human skeleton in a mound at Beach Bottom, West Virginia by a group of University of Pennsylvania scientists is of more than passing importance, for the skeleton, besides being surrounded by jewelry and stone implements and what must have been woven coverings, was buried with copper and bronze coins having undeciphered inscriptions. So again, with these, and I've heard about them before, we've read about them in other accounts about with these copper and bronze coins. So, talking about making alloys and mixtures of copper with other metals, having undeciphered inscriptions. So, undeciphered inscriptions, did anybody bother deciphering them? Or trying to? Or, what's going on? I mean, Professor so-and-so went there, University of Pennsylvania scientists. What happened? The mounds of the Ohio Valley have been one of ancient America's unsolved mysteries. Who the mound builders were, whence they came, and why they vanished constitute a hidden chapter of the past. It is already known that they had a civilization high in many respects, but the discovery of coins in the beach bottom grave is believed to be the first proof of anything resembling a monetary system among them, which would show a pretty high level of organization and hierarchy in the civilization and systems. All sorts of economic systems going on there. The size of the skeleton, which was that of a man about 8 feet in height, is interesting but not essentially significant. Primitive peoples have always worshipped physical perfection. A giant man could easily achieve leadership, which would justify such burial luxury as found at Beach Bottom. So isn't it interesting, their observation there? Okay, again, people of large stature ruling over peoples of shorter stature, such as that of the Watusi and the Tutsi in Africa, as I've gone over on this channel. But even 7-footers are not at all common today, and the existence of an 8-footer is new in the recorded knowledge of these mysterious early Americans. Only close examination can determine whence such people probably came, from the east or the west, from Europe or Asia. Meanwhile, it is interesting to know that giants who even coined money, lived in the distant past that knew the cryptic mounds of the upper Ohio. Very interesting account there, and doesn't say any date here, but looks pretty old. Nothing to say. Sometimes you get a hint of what the time period might be, but University of Pennsylvania scientists, so at least by the time of the establishment of that institution. And again, where'd they all go? Kingwood giant, 14 feet high, the skeleton of a giant. Oh, don't say giant. Kingwood, West Virginia, November 12th. A human skull was unearthed here, which measures 40 inches around the forehead. 40 inches, okay? You're trying to say, it's just, Native American ancestors. Yeah, they were just, they were Homo sapiens too, sure, just a little big. Slightly more robust. There's 40 inches around the forehead and 14 inches high, 14 feet high. Sound, slightly more robust to you? Slightly more robust. I like the way this guy puts Agent Smith. from the Matrix in there. Or whatever his name is. Skeleton of a giant, Romney. Indian relics in West Virginia. Interesting discoveries by a representative of the Smithsonian. The Romney, West Virginia correspondent of the Baltimore Sun says there has been a great deal of excitement here for several days over the discovery of Indian relics and remains by Mr. Warren K. Moorhead of the Smithsonian Institution. He was sent here on the strength of a letter in the Sun stating that the recent floods in the South Branch of the Potomac had unearthed a great many skeletons. On Wednesday, Mr. Moorhead made a tour of inspection up the river, and as the signs seemed very favorable, he procured a number of men the next day and dug several holes on the Pancakes Island, about 10 miles above this place. The result of the digging was the finding of several skeletons, pipes, bone beads, panther teeth worked up in the shape of ornaments, pottery, and copper plates, besides the skeleton of an immense buffalo, buried in a bed of ashes about 6 feet deep. Very interesting there. Immense buffalo. Maybe buffalo were kind of big way back then, like people, too. Oh, that's too far-fetched, right? Friday, the party went down to the Hanging Rocks about 4 miles below here, where, according to Kirchable's History of the Valley, a furious battle was fought between the Delawares and the Catawbas, which resulted in the massacre of the whole party of the Delawares. Here they dug along the riverbank on Mr. Herriot's farm. 11 skeletons were found inside a space of 20 feet. One of them must have been the skeleton of a giant, as the lower jawbone was almost twice the ordinary size. The femur was 2 inches longer than a 6-foot man. Wow. Than that of a 6-foot man. They had been buried in various positions, some stretched at full length, some sitting, and in some cases 3 or 4 in a heap, some of them with their feet sticking up. Today, your correspondents witnessed the opening of a very large mound about half a mile from town on the farm of Mr. Garrett Posteria, which contains a great many valuable trinkets, strings of beads, pottery, war hatchets, and several large sheets of mica, which they used for mirrors. Mr. Moorhead, being an expert, considers this last the oldest mound he has ever opened. So, sheets of mica used as mirrors, very interesting, yeah. Two giant skeletons, Putnam County, Charleston, West Virginia. This one's really kind of odd. News has just been received from Winfield, Putnam County, of the strange discovery of 2 human skeletons lying on a floating cake of ice in the Kanawha River near Red House Shoals Sunday. The skeletons were in a good state of preservation and were evidently the frames of large men. Some fragments of clothing surrounded the bones, but nothing to indicate any degree that the identity of the deceased or the locality from whence they floated on the ice. How odd is that? That's very weird. 1886. I don't know, but very strange. Browntown, 14 feet high, giant skeleton found in a riverbank, tomahawk at his side. Browntown, West Virginia. A remarkable discovery was made by Harry Berry, a teamster near the wharf landing. The recent flood had washed away a portion of the bank at that point and exposed to view a skeleton, which when dug out of the bank was found to be of enormous size. The skeleton was evidently that of an Indian. A pipe and tomahawk were found by his side. The skeleton is in fair state of preservation and is 14 feet in length. The skull, jaws, and teeth of the red man were well preserved. So again, with well-preserved teeth. So it's next to impossible for us today to have well-preserved teeth, folks. You know, it's very few of us make it through life without cavities and other things that our dentist picks up for us. And maybe we're lucky and get to keep most of our teeth most of our life, but some people don't, right? So this is a big issue, see? So it shows something about the diet. Some people don't get that, but it shows something about the diet of these people. They had a clean diet, okay? And dentists can tell you what types of foods are very, abrasive to teeth, caustic to teeth, wearing on teeth. So they can tell you what those things are. And these people being, equipped with their perfect teeth without cavities or anything like that suggests a certain kind of diet. Okay. They're saying vegetarian. They are dentists. All right? Not me. Hampshire County, 8 or 9 feet. It is said that a jawbone was plowed up near Moorfield, which would pass over the outside of a common man's lower jaw, that it contained 8 jaw teeth on either side. So, again, with these more molars in the mouth, and that they sat transversely in their sockets. A bone of that size would have belonged to a man 8 or 9 feet high. That there were 8 jaw teeth on either side may safely be set down as a mistake. You see what they're saying? So it's, doesn't match Homo sapien in any way, shape, or form. But this is among many skeletons that were dug up and we've already accounted for that had extra molars in their mouth. Often a lot extra molars. In this case, they're saying 8 on either side, so, that's a lot extra. And we've heard 6, and we've heard other amounts, and just jaws would be designed in a certain way to consume a certain kind of food or give the ability for a humanoid or an animal, let's say, to eat certain kinds of foods that maybe other animals could not, by the sheer design of their teeth would prohibit them from doing so. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to cover because I thought these from West Virginia, almost every single one of these was just fascinating. So I thought you might like to hear about these, and we'll move on to another state in the next video. And I hope to cover again the first chapter of Robert Schoch's book, Voyages of the Pyramid Builders, in between doing the Giants in the next video. Alrighty, guys, so that's it for West Virginia. Some fascinating stuff there. Copper and bronze coins with indecipherable descriptions, and sheets of mica for mirrors, and horn buds, and extra molars, and 18-footers, and 7-pound granite axes, a whole bunch of stuff. Alrighty? Alright, guys, anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button if you kindly would. And Budcat7 here, signing out. Peace.